In progress.
I know the camera's not great, but I will share. I'm going to do quite a bit of reading off my notes today for the next hour. So I will write on the board. So I can share it later because we need the name of the upload for YouTube anyway. So you'll be able to read what I write on the board then. So as you can see, if you can read it, I'm going to do a study on Project Blitz. Has anybody heard of Project Blitz? I don't want an explanation. I just want to know if anybody's heard of it, please.
No.
Yes.
Who said yes?
Me, Emma.
Suzanne, yes. Okay. So Project Blitz began in 2015. Well, the playbook did, basically. We know Project Blitz is back, well, way back. We'll talk about that later. So it began in 2015 in kind of quietness and secret. And it was basically on a website and it got discovered. So what Project Blitz is intended to do, basically it's it's a legislative it's a legislative assault by Christian nationalists. Basically to reshape America. I'll put that up as well. So the playbook basically began with a 116-page guide for state legislators listing 20 model bills under Christian right agenda, all under the rubric of religious freedom. Basically, that's what it was for. They took the name Project Blitz from the Blitz Creek. So I'll put here. Anyone know what the Blitz Creek is? So basically, I'll tell you what it is, but what it means is lightning war.
I was going to say the Blitz in the Second World War, but I don't know.
Yeah. So it means basically they got it from Hitler, so it basically means to attack violently in such a quick fashion, so the bills that they want, that's in the playbook, could happen before people could stop it. So basically what Hitler did, he used a certain way of like a tactic of combined of, like devastating air attacks with swifter moves on the ground forces, because he didn't want a long drawn out war. So that's where they got the Project Blitz from. It's from the Blitz Creek, and it means lightning war, and it was Hitler's tactics of war. So what they wanted to do with the playbook is they wanted to start out with what looked like small insignificant resolutions or bills, basically like putting signs up which we already know about, in God we trust, then kind of hit with more serious things or bills. So one of the founders of Project Blitz was a gentleman called David Barton. You'll have heard of him before. And he was a Texas-based businessman, and he basically owns the organization called Wall Builders, which you will have heard of, I'm sure. And they basically reject, so he basically rejects this organization, David Barton and many others, they reject separation of church and state. So he was just one of the founders. There's many more. We'll go into that a bit later on. And he takes inspiration from the Old Testament in describing a mission of rebuilding our nation's foundations. So Project Blitz first appeared on a website of, I think it was the Congressional. Yeah, it was discovered on a website in 2017. And it was the CPDF's website, and they're called, like I just said, the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation. Yeah, and then due to this being discovered anyway on this website in 2017 by those who kind of, the Democrats oppose and coming together of church and state, and also because it was getting bad press at the time, it soon went underground. So the playbook went underground. It was actually, even though it started in 2015, I think they gave it the name Project Blitz in 2017. And what they did is they sent this playbook out to evangelical leaders, those who were part of it, to break down how they wanted to reform the nation. So the playbook came in 3 steps, and there was 4 categories. Has anyone got an idea what the first step is? What would the first step be with this playbook? What would they want to introduce?
Religion in schools.
Yeah. Well, it was in God, the sign first. It was in God we trust. Who sent that then? Was that Emma?
Yes. I think that's about all I can remember from it. I thought it was to do with introducing religion into school. Yeah.
You remember they did this in 2001, not as a law, but just like as a symbolic, like a symbol, a sign of the motto of the United States. Yeah. But that now they want it in schools and other buildings nationwide. Just a side point, in 1956, the 84th Congress passed a joint resolution declaring "In God We Trust" as the national motto. It passed both the House and the Senate without debate, due to the fearing spread of, I think it's communism, and political leaders appealed to the faith of the nation replacing the old motto, I won't say this properly, e pluribus unum, which means out of many one. So just before 1956, sorry, they had out of many one. That's what the motto that they wanted, but they decided to choose in God we trust. 55 years later, in 2011, they began to sort of try and reaffirm the United States motto. House passed in God we trust legislation, even though it didn't pass the Senate, nor was it signed into law by the president, it still had significant ripple effects on subsequent measures, policies, and agencies' actions. So as I mentioned, in 1956, due to the fear of communism and the Cold War, and also there was a nuclear weapon threat as well, they introduced that in God we trust. They made it a new motto of the United States. It kind of wasn't new, we know that, I'll talk about that later, but they're bringing it back. Making in God we trust a new motto happened during an environment, this is just me writing this, during an environment of crisis. So the Congress decided in God we trust should be the official motto. So at the time, many evangelicals, Protestants, Christians said that we're the chosen people, conceived under God, and flourish under God. If we turn back from God, we do under our own peril. So this was actually signed into law by Dwight Eisenhower. So the motto introduced in 1956 was better than the first one, which was more about equality, I would think. Because if you say sort of out of many one, that could include, you know, both races, homosexuals, straight people, transgender, binary, Muslims, Christians, and so on. So out of many one is a much better motto, but they chose in God we trust. I don't know if you remember in 2010, Barack Obama had to address the state. What did he say, Emma, when he addressed the state in his national address? Do you remember?
About the motto, I'm not sure. Did he quote the old one?
He quoted the old one. He said, out of many one. And he got attacked by the churches by quoting that. And in 2014, he had to state the Pledge of Allegiance, and he stated again, out of many one. Again, not stating the motto in God we trust. We know he's all for separation of church and state. However, that brought him saying that brought back a bit of backlash. We know 2014 was a turning point. He maddened Steve Bannon and others, and in 2015 they started to form the group, you know, their motto, MAGA, Make America Great Again. So the first step of it, they tried to introduce was in God we trust into schools. Anyone think of what the second step could be? Being a bit mean, because it could be anything, couldn't it? Just trying to find a picture of it to show something. Bear with me. Right, so the second step was displaying the national motto. On license plate. So they wanted to put the motto on license plates and more public official buildings, and also on police guards. So they've accomplished a lot of this. We do see, if you live in America, you will see Ingobi Trust license plates. And you will see also some of the motto around in some places. With the license plates, they do get a percentage from every plate sold. And obviously that goes, the Ingobi Trust plates, and that goes towards a Christian right-wing agenda. We know they've actually got quite a lot of money. It probably goes into the millions, at least $1 million from just the plates, selling the plates. So we also know that they wanted to bring back the motto into courthouses, state houses, buildings of governments, and operational buildings. And they also wanted to introduce Bible teachers into schools. So what did A.T. Jones say about that?
Sorry, Natalie, what do you mean police guards? Is that guards?
Yeah, I think, I'm not quite sure. I think it would be maybe a motto or something on their uniform, or maybe on the cars.
Okay.
What does A.T. Jones say about Bible teaching in schools? Is Curtis there?
Yeah.
What does he say about bringing teaching into schools? Curtis, A.T. Jones.
What did A.T. Jones say about teaching Bibles in schools?
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't get your question, your exact question.
A.T. Jones say about Bible teachings in public schools?
To be honest, I'm not too sure.
All right. Anybody else?
I think from what I understand, he said that they should be kept out of government schools.
Yeah. He calls it church and state. It's church and state. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. So that, I think that's why he says that if you're going to teach, want to teach in like an Adventist school or something like that, but then the state schools shouldn't have any religion taught there.
Yeah. I remember we went over this, didn't we, in the camps a while ago. Tom, you did a study on it. Just all of these bills at the playbook, the Project Blitz playbook, what they're doing is they're sending them to their state government. So they're beginning at a state level, and then they're just pouring in as many bills as they can to be looked at by state governments and legislators, hopefully hoping that some will be passed. And we know that they are being passed. They also wanted to create a religious freedom day, a resolution or proclamation recognise a Christian national week, a proclamation recognising the importance of the Bible in history. They also want a specific days to commemorate Christian history. So we know they kind of already have one of the National Religious Freedom Days. I think the last one was January 16th, 2023. That's National Religious Freedom Day. So those responsible for pushing these bills have quoted, although resolutions are largely symbolic, they can still be used for positive. For example, the passage of a resolution is a statement of public policy. Resolutions can also be used for educational purposes, like in schools. So I think a resolution would have to be signed by chambers, though, and the president to become privy. So, and proclamations is like an official public announcement or a law decree, signed, I think, by federal officials and state legislators or the president. But first, they're just starting with resolutions, like trying to get it into policies. So all this comes under first and second, all come under the category 1 and 2, as I said, there's 4 categories and 3 steps, which if this paves the way for the third step or category. So the third step they wanted to bring back was religious liberty protection legislation. That where protection should jump out at us. Why should protection jump out at us? Religious liberty protection legislation. We're thinking about the Project Blitz and the right-wing agenda.
Sorry, Natalie, what was that? Hear it properly.
So the religious liberty protection legislation is the third step. So protection should jump out at us. Why? What do you think the protection means? Like religious liberty protection legislation. Why do they want to make that the third step? So basically what they want to do is they want to protect their own religious liberty, which is right-wing Christian agenda, isn't it? And how they do that these days, so that, as I said, they want the government to put out resolution statements or laws saying the government will, for like an example would be, government doesn't support homosexual couples, and they don't want information in schools being taught about it. They don't want, so that basically the public policy of the state to only encourage marriage between man and a woman, and basically would want to bring them back down now, wouldn't they? So that's what the religious liberty protection legislation is all about. It's about, yeah, let's have religious freedom, but let's protect our agenda and what we want to push forward. They also only want adoption, don't they? They only want to allow adoption for male and female couples, no adoption for same-sex couples. So basically what they want is they want to have protections to discriminate against who they want to. At a state level to begin with, they wanted bans with regards to reproductive rights, as we know, which we're seeing, and we've seen with the OTA and the Roe v. Wade, and we're seeing issues with regards to LGBTQ, and I'm sure we'll see more issues with regards to same-sex marriage and things in the future. Any questions so far? Do you understand what the Project Blitz playbook is about? Okay. So this final element, sorry, category, this all comes up, sorry, under category 1 to 3, and the final one is category 4, which is about talking points. Which basically is about counter anti-religious freedom. So what they want to do, what the talking points want to, what it means is they want to counter any anti-religious freedom legislation. Anti-religious freedom legislation. So what they want to do is like bring in bans on transgender conversion therapy, which we already know they're doing. They want to basically they want to demonize, you know, LGBTQ persons. They want to say it's bad for society, which we know Ron DeSantis says things like that in Florida. That's the kind of rhetoric. So that's what the counter anti-religious freedom legislation is, the fourth thing that they want to put in.
So just to ensure I understand what you're saying is, So there's points which there's anti-religious freedom legislation. For example, they would want to do conversion therapy on someone who's at the transitioning or has transitioned. I don't know what point. Anyway,
Yeah.
So they would want to do that, but there's legislation that prohibits that, which stops them from doing conversion therapy, stops anyone from doing conversion therapy. But then they bring up talking points to counter that legislation.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions? Just let me go over what we've done so far. So we've looked at when Project Blitz started, the playbook, it's in 2015. We've looked at who's behind it. We know that's one of them is more, but one of them is David Barton, who owns the organisation called Wall Builders, and they're against separation. They reject separation of church and state. And we know what it is. It's a legislative assault by Christian nationalists to reshape America. And then we're looking at the 3 steps. So the first step, in God We Trust, is to put in public schools, make the, start where it doesn't seem so, not so bad. It's not a big thing. So they start with stuff like that, and then they get more serious. Wanting things passed, pushing more bills towards their agenda, the legislators. And then step 2, they put license plates in, God We Trust license plates, and they got money from that. And also the same thing again, getting more progressive with putting in God We Trust in public buildings and government buildings, and as I said, police cars, which I think would be on police uniform and on cars maybe. And then the third step, we looked at, as you just seen, we looked at the religious liberty protection legislation. And then that's their protection of their right-wing agenda, where they want to discriminate against minorities, basically, and women. And then the category 4, which is the counter anti-religious freedom legislation, which Tom explained very well. I'll move on if no one's got any questions.
So when you say playbook,
Yeah.
Could you please define what the playbook is?
I'm coming up to that, Tom.
Okay.
Is that
Okay, sure.
go back to the Millerites as well. So the first bills discovered in the playbook, it's basically, Tom, it's basically like what those who have this agenda, what they wrote up to push towards, legislators to change laws. So it has all the bills and laws that they want passed. So the first bills discussed in the playbook, like I've mentioned, they were symbolic ones, like in God We Trust everywhere, pro-Christian ones like passing Christian Heritage Week resolutions, and then they get more serious where they want to pass things like anti-everybody else kind of bills, where they want to also want, Christian businesses, they want their owners to be able to discriminate against LGBTQ customers, which we've seen that, haven't we, in the past. What you've got to remember as well about the playbook itself, it's a 50-state strategy, so they want this nationwide. So now at the moment, since yeah.
So is a playbook, is it like a document written somewhere? Is it like
I put it on the forum actually.
Okay.
I put it on the Bible forum. I put one of the playbooks on the Project Blitz playbook on there. I'll try and send it to you again, Tom, so you can look at it.
Okay, so it's like a single document which has all these strategies.
On the forum, Natalie. Yeah. On our forum. Just post it on the UK forum.
Yeah, sure. What did you say, Tom?
No, just saying that. So this playbook is a document with this strategy.
Yeah.
That that this is how we're going to kind of do this Project Blitz. And so when referring to the playbook, it's the document which has all the strategy.
All the bills.
They also refer. Oh, is it just bills?
Yeah, all the bills that they want and how they're going to do it. They send it to all the evangelicals, and they send this also to the legislators in the states to try and get things passed, but as many bills passed as possible. We've been doing this for years, even before we realized what they were doing. And that's where the tactic of the blitzkrieg comes from, because they want to start with something not so bad, and then they want to push real fast with as many bills as possible. So they're sort of overwhelming, and some of them at least will get passed without people noticing. And they kind of make the words of the bills more secular, so it doesn't seem so bad. So right-wing, nationalistic, Christian agenda. So they've changed the Project Blitz playbook to Freedom for All. That's the new name because it got such bad press. But that's the new name. You won't find a lot of information out there about Freedom for All because they know people, you know, those who are opposing church and state, the coming together of church and state, they know that they're watching out for new bills that they're trying to get passed. So you won't find a lot of information about Freedom for All, but that's a new name. It's not called Project Blitz anymore. Right. So the Freedom for All is a Christian right multi-pronged strategy to push their faith through the government, like I've just said. The name Project Blitz referred to the idea that if Christian politicians jammed, like I've just said, legislatures with a variety of bills promoting Christianity in various ways, some of them would be eventually passed. The playbook included draft legislation that politicians could stamp their names on and submit for debate and passage. As I said before, David Barton was behind Project Blitz, but it was the result of a collaboration between the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation. It was also the National Legal Foundation. Which are basically a Christian law firm, and the pseudo-historian Dave Barton's pro-family legislation network. Pro-family legislation. Right, I'm going to share it. So basically, it was a collaboration between those I've just mentioned and a lot of other people, to be honest. The playbook took offline, as I said, a few years ago, and when they realised it was getting the wrong type of publicity, like I said, a guy called Frederick Clarkson, who writes for Religious Dispatches, found the missing playbooks in 2021. He quoted, "It's like getting a copy of the away team strategies right in your hands. Here's what he noticed about the new plans." So the playbooks advise legislators to cloak their religious mission in the guise of more secular intentions, and they've renamed several bills to make them sound more appealing. Thankfully, due to the resilience of democratic institutions and leaders fighting against the bills introduced over the past 3 years, fewer bills are being passed. For example, in 2020, 92 bills introduced and 8 were passed. In 2021, 74 bills introduced and 14 passed, according to the Blitz Watch. That's a website called blitzwatch.org that they're one of the ones watching this Project Blitz situation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read a few quotes from those fighting against Project Blitz and the separation, trying to get the separation of church and state. So in 2023, this is quoted by a religious equality watchdog, the American Atheist Organization. They quoted, "Christian nationalists have increasingly taken over the Republican Party, especially in very conservative areas. With Democrats controlling the presidency and the Senate, Christian nationalists will be unable to pass extremist bills at a federal level. Instead, they will continue to push their bills through the Republican majority state legislatures. Another quote. The 2022 Dobbs versus Jackson Women Health Organization's decision, which ended the constitutional right to an abortion, will greatly affect the 2023 state legislative session. States already with limited abortion restrictions like Florida are likely to consider complete bans, potentially challenging the state constitutional provisions that protect the access of abortion. And I just read this morning that I think it's Florida, Nebraska, are trying to bring in a 6-week ban. So we're getting closer and closer to an absolute ban. The president of American Atheist Movement quotes, "We know what Christian nationalists are planning for the coming state legislative session in 2023. The rights of women, LGBTQ people, racial and religious minorities are on the line." Any questions? Just going a bit fast through those quotes. So let's go back to where it all started with the symbolic bills, "In God We Trust." So you might think it's 1956, like I showed you earlier, but it's not. It's not just them. Can anyone tell me when "In God We Trust" was used in the past, a lot earlier than 1956? Anyone know?
Sometime in the Millerite history.
So
Is it 1860s?
1860s, did you say, Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's draw a line. Well, I've drawn a line. "In God We Trust" issue came about. Even though Project Blitz, like I said, playbook is written for our time, the playbook that we live in now. As I said, Project Blitz started way back, like Tom just said, in 1861. In 1861, there was a call from the Protestant churches to place a religious inscription on their currency. There's a call to place an inscription on their money. So by 1863, the inscription was decided. What was that inscription, Emma?
In 61.
In 1863, there was a call by the Protestants, but what in 1863, it was decided what that would be.
Was that "In God We Trust"?
Yeah. By 1864, it becomes official. So basically it was stamped. That's going to be the motto. Anyone think of what this date could be? The Cedry there. What time period is this?
No, see,
Anyone else? Magda?
65?
Yeah. So in 1865, it was an act of Congress which placed "In God We Trust" on all coins that could bear its inscription. It was an act of Congress. So we're just going back to the symbolic signs that they started with in our time, but it goes all the way back to the Civil War time at Millerites. And interestingly, they took advantage here of the national crisis to introduce their agenda in 1861 with the call from the presidents to put the inscription on the currency. And you know, during the crisis time, because it was a civil war time, the more people are more inclined to go along with it than if they would if there wasn't a crisis. Even though in our time we're seeing all these bills being passed and there's not so much as a crisis in the United States, there is, but you know what I mean. There's still, I know they're still passing laws, but as we get progressive and closer to the Sunday law crisis, they'll be able to do more extreme things past the Sunday law. So under crisis, if you remember in 2001, with 9/11, the evangelicals blamed the attack on America on feminism and homosexuality. So they believed that God had taken away his protection from the United States because it was meant to be a Christian nation. They had removed God from its politics, and there was rampant immorality, is what they thought in 2001 when 9/11 and the towers got hit. We know that Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson have quoted after 9/11, God allowed the terrorists to succeed in their deadly mission because the United States had become a nation of abortion, homosexuality, and secular schools and courts, and the American Civil Liberties Union. So they're basically, just like in 1861 and 1865, we know back in this day here that they were saying it was immorality, wasn't it? That's why they're getting the judgment of God. And we know Ellen White tells us different. And in 2001, the evangelicals, they have the same rhetoric of being judged by God due to immorality. Our nation or government is meant to be Christian and enforce morality. And nothing has really changed when we come down to 2023. This is the rhetoric that's going on really in disguise in some places. So we should remember that between 1861 and 1863, the Democrats, the South, were winning. So what do the Republicans or the North do? They start to panic. I'm just going to paraphrase a quote by A.T. Jones. It's February 1863. There began an organized religious movement composed of evangelical Protestant churches of the country to get the government of the United States committed by direct legislation to the recognition of Christian religion and the national adoption or enforcement of Sunday as a Christian Sabbath or the Lord's Day. They propose first to accomplish their purpose to an amendment to the national constitution. I found that interesting. Continuing the quote, declaring the United States to be a Christian nation, so placing all Christian laws and institutions and usages under the deniable legal basis in the fundamental law of the land. So what was that movement called, Emma, that A.T. Jones was talking about, that they panicked and they wanted to reform? What was that movement?
National Reform Movement.
Where do we put that on the line of the Millerites?
I think 1863. I'm not wrong.
Yeah. So National Reform Movement, this movement that A.T. Jones and our pioneers fought later on, all the way up to 1888 and actually up to 1893, was the National Reform Movement. On the Ellen G. White site, under WEGW, I think. Yeah. I think it's 120.1 and 2. I'll paraphrase. It mentions that the national reform movement was brought about as the North, the Republicans, think they are under the wrath of God and they want to appease God. So that's why they started with national reform movements. Of course, we agree that they were under the wrath of God, but it wasn't due to immorality, was it? It was. Why do we think they were under the wrath of God, Suzanne, or anyone else? Down in this time.
Just the question again, sorry.
Why were they under the wrath of God at this time? Why did they bring in the national reform movement? I know there's two questions, but firstly, why were they under the wrath of God from 1861 to 1865?
Slavery?
Yeah. And that's why they thought they'd bring in a reform movement. So they think they're under the judgment of God or the wrath of God. They say they haven't recognized the United States as a Christian nation and we haven't enforced the moral law. But we know that Ellen White says the wrath of God was due to slavery, like you said. Any questions?
So they're seeking to make it a Christian nation. The National Reform Movement, they're not pushing Sunday back there, though, are they, in 63?
They're not what, sorry?
Are they pushing Sunday legislation in 63?
No.
Mm. So they start doing that in the 1880s.
Yeah. The National Reform Movement is what A.T. Jones was fighting about, wasn't it, when pioneers? But it started here in the time of crisis, in the time of, being under the wrath of God. And I just wanted to bring back when In God We Trust started. The symbol or the motto of that started also in a crisis, and it was back in the Millerite time, and mentioned the reform movement and how they dealt with that. It's all about, crisis, let's get back to God, let's enforce morality, let's enforce morality on people. And when we look at our time now, and we know the Project Blitz, the first step was In God We Trust. It's like they're going back. And we know that Trump said that, didn't he? He said, we're going back. That's great. We're going back to this, basically. This is where it all started. I think this is the first place we saw In God We Trust motto. And then obviously we saw it again being brought back in 1956, 2001. And then we've started to see this playbook come around. Any other questions?
It's not a question really, but it's just quite interesting to think that if they, we say that Jesus could have come in 1863. And when you look at the damage now from that, so straight away from 63, we can see National Reform Movement, In God We Trust, and stamped on the coin in 64, and then Act of Congress in 65, how that's changed the shape of America, because most people who even don't live in America know that In God We Trust are on the coinage.
Yeah.
It's pushed as a Christian nation in that sense, and how much that's been dominating since 63 when he should have come. So we went into real darkness and apostasy because he didn't come.
Yeah, and they've been able to, it's been a slow progress, but they've been playing the long game, haven't they? And they're really now, we're seeing the quick steps of what they've been wanting to do all along, and bringing it back as well in 1956, just reaffirming and getting that through legislation. Before I knew any of this as a Christian, I always thought that America was a Christian nation. I really did. It was meant to be. I didn't realize about
Absolutely
church and state, because I think my first travel was Colorado, and I seen religion. I'm sure I saw the signs there, and I thought, yeah, it's a Christian nation. That was years ago, so I wouldn't have understood separation of church and state. I actually thought, oh, isn't that nice? But you see now the evilness of it, because they want to suppress the minorities. I'm sorry I've gone through it fast, and there's not been much interaction. Of course, maybe you've forgotten that Elder Tess in 2018, she started off this study of Project Blitz, and she just mentioned a few things, and I thought I would look into it again. So I hope it's been beneficial. Let me just summarize. So as I said, we've looked at Project Blitz and where it began in 2015. And I mentioned the name, the Blitzkrieg, which was mean and lightning war from Hitler's war tactics to make a swift attacks, basically to cause a surprise that they didn't have a long drawn out war. That was Hitler's tactic. And they were also, you know, with the bills, if we compare and contrast why they called it that is they wanted to get these bills in unnoticed and as quick and as many as possible. And I mentioned who's behind the playbook. We mentioned the organisation War Builders. Elder Tess has brought that up in the past, and others who are against separation of church and state. I explained the playbook, what it is. It's a legislative assault by Christian nationalists to reshape America, their right-wing agenda. Then we looked at the 3 steps. We started with the playbook. I said it involves 3 steps, 4th category, starting with the first step being a bit symbolic and innocent about the motto "In God We Trust" into public schools. Then it went on to car plates and more into, you know, public buildings, and then they wanted to get in more serious bills addressed, hopefully. And we know it's a 50-state strategy. Now it's called the Freedom for All. It's the Christian right multi-pronged strategy to push their faith through the government. As I said, it's hard to find any non-freedom for all, but the bills and the playbook or the legislations, they're all still being passed as we see them ourselves right now. We see it obviously with, it's too late for many, like we see how Roe v. Wade, we never thought that would be overturned, and how quick and swift they're moving with their agenda. However, there are, I know we've come in late with this message, but there are democratic institutions, organisations pushing back and delaying the inevitable, which we call Daniel 11 verse 41, Sunday law. Any questions? But really, when you look at this, you really see that we are so far down and so close to the Sunday law. You know, what more can be passed? We know it's all about gender. You know, there's all other things to play. We've got the war and everything, but over the last few years, especially the last three years, when I mentioned all the bills that have been pushed forward, and not a lot have been passed, but there has been some passed that are very significant, which you know, and the way the voting is going and the redistricting and redirecting, it's all going to happen pretty fast, I believe. Any questions? The final moves will be rapid. Everyone's very quiet when I give studies. I don't know why. Is there something I'm doing right? Do I need to interact more with you?
No, we're listening to you and interestingly trying
Okay.
to drink it in.
Okay, because the last one everyone was quiet as well. I can't remember the subject, what that was. Well, if nobody's got any questions.
Lightning speed, that's why. Sometimes.
Right, okay. Well, here's the time if you don't understand what I've been saying. We've looked at the Millerites, where in God we trust, and then you can't even see. I'll share with whoever the documents I shared on the Bible forum, so you can see the bills that have been passed. It gives you a list of bills that have been passed and ones I think that are trying to be passed. Right, I'm going to pray if you've got no more questions. You want to kneel with me while I pray?